Okay, let's find out if Zeus believes Percy's story about what happened. Address Lord Zeus, boy, Poseidon told me. Tell him your story. So I told Zeus everything, just as it had happened. I took out the metal cylinder which began sparking in the sky god's presence and laid it at his feet. There was a long silence, broken only by the crackle of the hearth fire. Zeus opened his palm. The lightning bolt flew into it. As he closed his fist, the metallic points flared with electricity, until he was holding what looked more like a classic thunderbolt, a 5-meter javelin of arcing, hissing energy that made the hairs on my scalp rise. I sense the boy tells the truth, Zeus muttered, but that Ares would do such a thing. It is most unlike him. He is proud and impulsive, Poseidon said. It runs in the family. Lord? I asked. They both said, yes. Ez did not act alone. Someone else, something else, came up with the idea. I described my dreams and the feeling I'd had on the beach, that momentary breath of evil that had seemed to stop the world and made Ez back off from killing me. In the dreams, I said, the voice told me to bring the bolt to the underworld. Ez hinted that he'd been having dreams too. I think he was being used, just as I was, to start a war. You're accusing Hades after all? Zeus asked. No, I said. I mean, Lord Zeus, I've been in the presence of Hades. This feeling on the beach was different. It was the same thing I felt when I got close to that pit. That was the entrance to Tartarus, wasn't it? Something powerful and evil is stirring down there, something even older than the gods. Poseidon and Zeus looked at each other. They had a quick, intense discussion in ancient Greek. I only caught one word: father. Poseidon made some kind of suggestion, but Zeus cut him off. Poseidon tried to argue. Zeus held up his hand angrily. We will speak of this no more, Zeus said. I must go personally to purify this thunderbolt in the water of Lemnos, to remove the human taint from its metal. He rose and looked at me. His expression softened just a fraction of a degree. You have done me a service, boy. Few heroes could have accomplished as much. I had help, sir, I said. Grover Underwood and Annabeth Chase. To show you my thanks, I shall spare your life. I do not trust you, Perseus Jackson. I do not like what your arrival means for the future of Olympus. But for the sake of peace in the family, I shall let you live. Thank you, sir. Do not presume to fly again. Do not let me find you here when I return. Otherwise you shall taste this bolt, and it shall be your last sensation. Thunder shook the palace. With a blinding flash of lightning, Zeus was gone. I was alone in the throne room with my father. Your uncle, Poseidon sighed, has always had a flair for dramatic exits. I think he would have done well as the god of theatre. An uncomfortable silence. Sir, I said, what was in that pit? Poseidon regarded me. Have you not guessed? Kronos, I said, the king of the Titans. Even in the throne room of Olympus, far away from Tityrus, the name Kronos darkened the room, made the hearth fire seem not quite so warm on my back. Poseidon gripped his trident. In the first war, Percy, Zeus cut our father, Kronos, into 1,000 pieces, just as Kronos had done his own father. Zeus cast Kronos' remains into the darkest pit of Tartarus. The Titan army was scattered, their mountain fortress on Etna destroyed, their monstrous allies driven to the furthest corners of the earth. And yet Titans cannot die, any more than we gods can. Whatever is left of Kronos is still alive in some hideous way, still conscious in his eternal pain, still hungering for power. He's healing, I said. He's coming back. Poseidon shook his head. From time to time over the ions, Kronos is stirred. He enters men's nightmares and breathes evil thoughts. He wakens restless monsters from their depths. But to suggest he could rise from the pit is another thing. That's what he intends, father. That's what he said. Poseidon was silent for a long time. Lord Zeus has closed discussion on this matter. He will not allow talk of Kronos. You have completed your quest, child. It is all you need to do. But, I stopped myself. Arguing would do no good. It would very possibly anger the only god who I had on my side. As, as you wish, father. A faint smile played on his lips. Obedience does not come naturally to you, does it? No, sir. I must take some blame for that, I suppose. The sea does not like to be restrained. He rose to his full height and took up his trident. Then he shimmered and became the size of a regular man, standing directly in front of me. You must go, child, but first know that your mother has returned. I stared at him, completely stunned. My mother? You'll find her at home. Hades sent her when you recovered his helmet. Even the Lord of Death pays his debts. My heart was pounding. I couldn't believe it. Do you? Would you? I wanted to ask Poseidon if I wanted to ask if Poseidon would come with me to see her, but then I realised that was ridiculous. I imagined loading the god of the sea into a taxi and taking him to the Upper East Side. If he'd wanted to see my mum all these years, he would have. And there was smelly Gabe to think about. Poseidon's eyes took on a little sadness. When you return home, Percy, you must make an important choice. You will find a package waiting in your room. A package? You will understand it when you see it. No one can choose your path, Percy. You must decide. I nodded, though I didn't know what he meant. Your mother is a queen among women, Poseidon said wistfully. I had not met such a mortal woman in 1,000 years. Still, I am sorry you were born, child. I have brought you a hero's fate, and a hero's fate is never happy. It is never anything but tragic. I tried not to feel hurt. Here was my own dad telling me he was sorry I'd been born. I don't mind, father. Not yet, perhaps, he said. Not yet, but it was an unforgivable mistake on my part. I'll leave you then. I bowed awkwardly. I I won't bother you again. I was 5 steps away when he called, Perseus! I turned. There was a different light in his eyes, a fiery kind of pride. You did well, Perseus. Do not misunderstand me. Whatever else you do, know that you are mine. You are a true son of the sea god. As I walked back through the city of the gods, conversation stopped. The muses paused their concerts. People and satyrs and naiads all turned towards me, their faces filled with respect and gratitude, and as I passed, they knelt, as if I was some kind of hero. 15 minutes later, still in a trance, I was back on the streets of Manhattan. I called a taxi to my mum's apartment, rang the doorbell, and there she was, my beautiful mother, smelling of peppermint and licorice, the wariness and worry evaporating from her face as soon as she saw me. Percy, oh thank goodness, Mum, my baby! She crushed the air right out of me. We stood in the hallway as she cried and ran her hands through my hair. I'll admit it, my eyes were a little misty too. I was shaking. I was so relieved to see her. She told me she had just appeared at the apartment that morning, scaring Gabe half out of his wits. She didn't remember anything since the Minotaur, and couldn't believe it when Gabe told her I was a wanted criminal, travelling across the country, blowing up national monuments. She'd been going out of her mind with worry all day, because she hadn't heard the news. Gabe had forced her to go into work, saying she had a month's salary to make up, and she'd better get started. I swallowed back my anger and told her my own story. I tried to make it sound less scary than it had been, but that wasn't easy. I was just getting to the fight with Ayres when Gabe's voice interrupted from the living room. Hey, Sally, that meatloaf done yet or what? She closed her eyes. He isn't going to be happy to see you, Percy. The store got 500,000 phone calls today from Los Angeles. Something about free appliances? Oh, yeah, about that. She managed a weak smile. Just don't make him angrier, all right? Come on. In the month I'd been gone, the apartment had turned into Gabeland. Garbage was ankle deep on the carpet. The sofa had been reupholstered in beer cans. Dirty socks and underwear hung off lampshades. Gabe and 3 of his big friends were playing poker at the table. When Gabe saw me, his cigar dropped out of his mouth. His face got redder than lava. You got nerve coming here, you little punk. I thought the police. He's not a fugitive after all, my mum interjected. Isn't that wonderful, Gabe? Gabe looked back and forth between us. He didn't seem to think my homecoming was so wonderful. Bad enough I had to give back your life insurance money, Sally, he growled. Get me the phone. I'll call the cops. Gabe, no! He raised his eyebrows. Did you just say no? You think I'm going to put up with this punk again? I can still press charges against him for ruining my Camaro. But, he raised his hand, and my mother flinched. For the first time, I realised something. Gabe had hit my mother. I didn't know when or how much, but I was sure he'd done it. Maybe it had been going on for years, when I wasn't around. A balloon of anger started expanding in my chest. I came towards Gabe, instinctively taking my pen out of my pocket. He just laughed. What, punk? You're going to write on me? You touch me and you are going to jail forever. You understand? Hey, Gabe, his friend Eddie interrupted. He's just a kid. Gabe looked at him resentfully and mimicked in a voice, just a kid. His other friends laughed like idiots. I'll be nice to you, punk. Gabe showed me his tobacco-stained teeth. I'll give you 5 minutes to get your stuff and clear out. After that, I'll call the police. Gabe, my mother pleaded. He ran away, Gabe told her. Let him stay gone. I was itching to uncap Riptide, but even if I did, the blade wouldn't hurt humans. And Gabe, by the loosest definition, was human. My mother took my arm. Please, Percy, come on, we'll go to your room. I let her pull me away, my hands still trembling with rage. My room had been completely filled with Gabe's junk. There were stacks of used car batteries and rotting bouquet of sympathy flowers with a card from somebody who'd seen his Barbara Walters interview. Gabe is just upset, honey, my mum told me. I'll talk to him later. I'm sure it'll work out. Mum, it'll never work out. Not as long as Gabe's here. She wrung her hands nervously. I'll take you to work with me for the rest of the summer. In the autumn, maybe there's another boarding school. Mum, she lowered her eyes. I'm trying, Percy. I need some time. A package appeared on my bed. At least I could have sworn it hadn't been there a moment before. It was a battered cardboard box about the right size to fit a basketball. The address on the mailing slip was in my own handwriting. The gods. Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York. With best wishes, Percy Jackson. Over the top in black marker, in a man's clear, bold print, was the address of our apartment, and there were words, Return to sender. Suddenly, I understood what Poseidon had told me on Olympus. A package, a decision. Whatever else you do, know that you are mine. You are a true son of the sea god. I looked at my mother. Mum, do you want Gabe gone? Percy, it isn't that simple. Mum, just tell me. That jerk has been hitting you. Do you want him gone or not? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Percy, I do, and I'm trying to get up my courage to tell him. But you can't do this for me. You can't solve my problems. I looked at the box. Problem. I wanted to slice that package open, plop it on the poker table, and take out what was inside. I could start my very own statue garden right here in the living room. That's what a Greek hero would do in the stories. That's what Gabe deserved. But a hero story always ended in tragedy. Poseidon had told me that. I remembered the underworld. I thought about Gabe's spirit drifting forever in the fields of asphodel, or condemned to some hideous torture behind the barbed wire of the fields of punishment. An eternal poker game, sitting up to his waist in boiling oil, listening to opera music. Did I have the right to send someone there? Even Gabe? A month ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. Now, I can do it, I told my mum. One look inside this box and he'll never bother you again. She glanced at the package and seemed to understand immediately. No, Percy, she said, stepping away. You can't. Poseidon called you a queen, I told her. He said he hadn't met a woman like you in 1,000 years. Her cheeks flushed. Percy, you deserve better than this, Mum. You should go to college, get your degree. You can write your novel, meet a nice guy maybe. Live in a nice house. You don't need to protect me anymore by staying with Gabe. Let me get rid of him. She wiped a tear off her cheek. You sound so much like your father, she said. He offered to stop the tide for me once. He offered to build me a palace at the bottom of the sea. He thought he could solve all my problems with a wave of his hand. What's wrong with that? Her multicoloured eyes seemed to search inside me. I think you know, Percy. I think you're enough like me to understand. If my life is going to mean anything, I have to live it myself. I can't let a god take care of me, or my son. I have to find the courage on my own. Your quest has reminded me of that. We listened to the sound of poker chips, swearing, and ESPN from the living room television. I'll leave the box, I said. If he threatened you... She looked pale, but she nodded. When will you go, Percy? Half-Blood Hill. For the summer or forever? I guess that depends. We locked eyes, and I sensed that we had an agreement. We could see how things stood at the end of the summer. She kissed my forehead. You'll be a hero, Percy. You'll be the greatest of all. I took one last look around my bedroom. I had a feeling I'd never see it again. Then I walked with my mother to the front door. Leaving so soon, punk? Gabe called after me. Good riddance. I had one last twinge of doubt. How could I turn down the perfect chance to take revenge on him? I was leaving here without saving my mother. Hey, Sally, he yelled. What about that meatloaf, huh? A steely look of anger flared in my mother's eyes, and I thought just maybe I was leaving her in good hands after all, her own. The meatloaf is coming right up, my dear, she told Gabe. Meatloaf surprise. She looked at me and winked. The last thing I saw as the door swung shut closed was my mother staring at Gabe as if she were contemplating how she would look as he. Sorry. Let me finish that last sentence again. The last thing I saw as the door swung closed was my mother staring at Gabe as if she were contemplating how he would look as a garden. That's the end of that chapter. I think we've got one chapter left. So hopefully we can finish it tomorrow.